to do this live video to explain how I work with my mistakes. And I do make mistakes when I speak. I'm not a native speaker of the English language, but and I think it's okay to make mistakes. We all make them. It doesn't matter in our first language or in our second language. I see that a lot of people are frustrated by the idea that they can be making mistakes in their speech. I think this fear of making a mistake is a big roadblock for many people to improve their language skills. So in this video, I wanted to show you how I work with my own mistakes in my speech when I speak English. I don't want to say it's an algorithm, but I've prepared a few strategies that I myself use, and hopefully some of you will find it useful as well. It can be applicable in your, if you're learning English and if you find it useful, try it out, let me know how it works for you. What do you do if you hear that you've just made a mistake? Let's talk about conversations. Let's talk about speaking skills right now. So imagine you are having a conversation with somebody and you hear you said something wrong. Actually, this is a good thing. This is a good thing that you are able to hear that you said something wrong. A lot of people don't even get to that point because they are afraid to make a mistake in their speech. And because they're so afraid of making a mistake, they simply say nothing, or they think so hard about every next word that they're about to say. They are overthinking, they're translating every next word and preposition that they're about to say because they aim at making a perfect sentence. But what is pathetic to me, at least, is that these people, deep inside, they know that probably they will not make a perfect sentence because they have not succeeded before and they have not succeeded enough times so that, to build that necessary positive experience where confidence comes from. And because there is no positive experience, every time they want to say something, they feel stuck, but not even in the middle of the conversation. They feel stuck deep inside if whatever they're going to say next is going to be correct or not. And that's a big problem if you are planning to improve your speaking skills, because if you want to improve your speaking skills, you need to speak. And if you do not speak because you're afraid of making mistakes in your speech, that's a vicious cycle. It becomes a vicious cycle that we want to break. What do I do? Again, today I'm going to be talking about my personal experience, what I personally do. I'm not saying that this is what everybody should do, what everybody must do, or that's some kind of unique methodology. It's simply the strategies that I've been using myself. First of all, I do not see a big problem in making mistakes because I make them in my first language as well. If I am not competent in some subject, or if I talk about something for the first time in my first language, like today I was having people at my apartment and I was trying to explain to them that my sound system does not work, and I have no idea, I have no clue how it works. I was explaining to them in the Russian language, which is my first language, and I couldn't explain to them which cable connects to which one and where it belongs and how it's supposed to work because I simply do not know this vocabulary in my first language. And even if I say all the words grammatically correctly, I have no clue what I'm saying. I really don't know if what I'm saying makes sense to people, and people who are professional, who are competent in these matters, they know that I'm not immediately. So I'm making a lot of mistakes, or I'm saying a lot of silly things even in my first language. I don't see a big problem in the fact that we all make mistakes, and that I make mistakes in my speech. What I do pay attention to, though, is that mistakes don't create a situation where I feel stuck. I don't want this situation. And for me, the most important thing is to get unstuck as soon as I notice it. In order to notice that I am stuck, I need to hear that I made a mistake. What we want to do first is we want to learn to hear what we are saying. And this is problem number one for a lot of people. Let's say when I suggest to people that they should record their own voice and they should listen to how it sounds, a lot of people don't really like this idea, and when they get to listen to what they have just said, they go like, no, please delete that voice message. That's not me. I don't like the sound of my voice, and I don't feel comfortable listening to the sound of my voice. I can understand that. I can relate to that, because that used to be a big problem for myself as well. However, if you want to work with your mistakes, well, at least that's what I keep telling myself. If I want to improve the way I speak, I need to know what I'm doing wrong. I need to know where I make mistakes. In order to make mistakes, I actually have to speak, because I make them when I speak, right? And in order to know what I said wrong, first of all, I need to hear what I actually said so that I can identify a mistake in my speech. In the beginning, it might take a lot of practice to even identify a mistake, to be aware of the fact that what you said doesn't sound right. And later, as you practice listening to what you're actually saying, and as you learn to hear what you're actually saying, then this process happens a lot faster. You hear a mistake, you notice it immediately, and you can immediately correct that. That's what I mean. This is a very important step number one. So you should be able to hear what you are saying. How do you check if you actually hear what you're saying? If you heard what you said, you can repeat it one more time, exactly the way you said it. Or you can, use your smartphone to turn the voice recorder on, record yourself as you're speaking, then listen back to what you just said and ask yourself, do you remember yourself saying that? Do you remember how you said that? And does it sound correct to you? Does it sound good for you? Yes or no? Just, practice giving feedback to yourself. And you don't need to record yourself all day. A couple sentences will do. Or one phone call would be enough. Just record one phone call and then listen to how you talk during this phone conversation. If you use Zoom, and I think everybody's using Zoom right now, because everyone is having conversations online, there's an option to record a conversation in Zoom, and that's a wonderful opportunity to give feedback to yourself and to learn to hear what you're actually saying. Let's imagine a situation where we don't have time to think about whether it was grammatically correct or not, we don't have time to apply any strategies. Let's imagine that I already know how to hear to what I'm saying myself. In the middle of the conversation, I heard that I made a mistake. That's okay. I acknowledge that I made a mistake. As I said earlier, it is not supposed to make me feel stuck. So if I feel that I don't want to continue the sentence because I started it wrong, or I'm not saying what I meant to say and I'm moving in the wrong direction, or if I notice that, oh my God, I made a grammatical mistake, or I forgot my preposition, or I used the wrong article, I just stop and I correct myself immediately. So there are two types of mistakes. For example, I hear that I made a grammatical mistake, right? So it might be grammar. Or I hear that it's a content mistake. I didn't want to say this, but I said it. And it doesn't make sense. It's just not logical. I don't want to go that way. This is easy. This is really easy. If you know that you should say, I do business, but for whatever reason, we don't really need to go into the reason, and you don't need to analyze why you did this mistake or made this mistake, right? What is correct? Actually, if you look it up in the dictionary, you will find that the correct way to say it is to make a mistake. I hear so many native speakers say, I did a mistake, so maybe it's becoming the new norm. It's not ideal, it's not grammatically, 100% grammatically correct, and if you're right, I would not recommend you use the verb do in writing. However, people do say it, native speakers say it, they say I did a mistake. But if you notice that you made a grammatical mistake, if I notice that I made a grammatical mistake and I hear it, I just correct it immediately. So if I said, for whatever reason, I made business, I just immediately correct myself and say, I'm sorry, I did business. Just immediately notice, correct, and say it again. No problem. I don't see why people make such a big issue, out of it. Just correct yourself immediately and move on. I think the problem is that many people start analyzing why they made this mistake. Why did they say it incorrectly if they know that this is incorrect? Why do they keep making the same mistake if they learned this rule 2 years ago? Or if they learned this school in primary school, right? Or if they learned this rule so many times. Trust me, it does not make any difference, and most importantly, it's not helping you in any way to improve your speaking skills. If you start analyzing every mistake, like why you are making it, you're not going anywhere. What is important is that you hear it, and when you hear it, you need to learn to correct it immediately. And then you will create a number of experiences for yourself where you hear it, you correct it, you hear it, you correct it. At some point, you'll just stop making it. And you will hear that you keep saying the correct variant. That's it. When you know how to listen to yourself and when you can hear what you're saying, you will hear not only mistakes, but you will also start hearing that everything you're saying is correct, is grammatically correct. Now this is a little bit more difficult because it's not just the wrong word anymore. When you made when you said something that doesn't make sense and you don't want to continue, you might feel that you're stuck because you don't know how to continue your thought, or you just forgot, And again, we're all human. Why not just say, oh my gosh, I forgot this word, it's on the tip of my tongue. And that's it. And people will understand. So here is a bunch of phrases that I personally use. Again, phrase number 1. Can you believe it? I forgot this word. It's on the tip of my tongue. Or I can say something like, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant to say. Let me start over. Or I can say something like, oh my gosh, I forgot what I wanted to say. I hope it will come back to me in a minute. Or I can say something like, forget what I just said. It doesn't make sense. Let me put it differently. And I just start over. That's it. This is a number of phrases that I use because I allow myself to make a mistake. I assume, or I expect, it's a better word, I expect. You see, I said the wrong word now, assume, and I immediately corrected myself. I expect that I might make a mistake. And, I know that there is an opportunity that I might need to use some of those phrases. So I make sure that I know how to say these phrases and I feel okay saying them. You need to really practice those phrases out loud. You need to practice saying them in the middle of your conversation because you will have plenty of opportunities to say them. We always make mistakes. We always forget what we wanted to say, and a lot of people start their sentence and they drop it halfway for many reasons. Maybe they didn't know how to translate the next word, maybe they forgot what they wanted to say, maybe they changed their mind. It does not really matter at all, because if we're practicing English right now here, if we're talking about improving our English skills in order to have better conversations with people, we always imagine that we're practicing our speaking skills not for the sake of passing a test, but we want other people to understand what we're saying. Right? We want other people to understand what we tell them. We always remember it's a dialogue, it's a conversation. And if it's an interesting conversation where people genuinely want to converse, where people care about each other, where people want to understand the information that's being received and that's being sent, then people will probably also understand that you forgot a word and they will wait a couple of seconds. If you need, 3 to 5 seconds to put your thoughts together or think about what you want to say next, that's okay. Absolutely. What matters here is the intonation. What matters is how you say these words. And I understand that in those moments you feel not very confident because you have no idea what you're going to say next. But you need to practice saying those phrases confidently. When I say confidently, I mean allow yourself an opportunity to make a mistake. This is a real opportunity. This might happen, and it probably has happened to you a million of times. So if it happens again, you know that you're ready. Now, what actually happens when we have a conversation and we cannot say a word, like we're not even talking about this right now, we can't say a word because we are afraid to make a mistake. A lot of people don't have conversations. They don't make conversations because they don't know what's going to happen next. What if they make a mistake? When people are afraid of making a mistake, they're not really afraid of their grammatical mistakes. Again, if we're talking to another human being, there's always a reaction. And people are really afraid of that reaction. It's what I call the fear of judgment. We think, what will other people think of us if they hear that we made a mistake, right? Or let's say if you're making a presentation at work and you're supposed to give brilliant, compelling presentations in the English language, but you know that your level is probably not good enough, or your presentations in English are not as interesting and as compelling as when you make them in the Russian language, in your first language. You know this deep inside, and every time you open your mouth to deliver a talk, you feel like you're going at least a couple of levels down to a more primitive level, right, of a conversation or of a presentation. And you know that you can do it better in your first language, and in the second language you accept the reality, you accept that you have to speak in way simpler forms, you have to make simpler sentences, and you cannot always communicate what you really mean. But that's not a big deal, again, it's not a problem. The problem is that people are afraid of people's opinions about their language skills. What can we do about this? Fear of judgment, or fear of opinions, all of these things, they're happening only in your head. In reality, most of the times people don't care. They really don't care about your language mistakes. It doesn't make a lot of, it doesn't change their life in any way. It doesn't affect their life in any way. And you cannot control what other people will think of you. It's a useless, it's a pointless game. And you're wasting your own time. The only way, for myself at least, to not even think about it, is to take care of my inner state when I talk. This is the most important thing. This is probably the only thing that matters. When I speak, my inner state matters the most. And my inner state influences everyone who's in the room. It influences my conversation partner, but most importantly, it influences my intonation, my way of putting words together, my own energy, and my level of confidence. Right? If I take care of my inner state, I am very attentive to myself. I hear what I'm saying. And when I hear what I'm saying, I know if what I'm saying makes sense or it doesn't make sense. And other people react okay, and we are having beautiful conversations. Other people always feel our inner state, and you probably can relate to that yourself when you talk to people who are nervous, when you talk to people who are in a hurry, when you talk to people who don't really want to speak to you, when you talk to people you don't really like, or those people don't really like you, you always feel that, and it doesn't matter what they say, how grammatically correct their speech is, you always feel it. Your language skills here don't matter at all, absolutely. It's not a language issue at all. So what I have found out for myself, what works is, the number one thing you can do is you can, if you are afraid of judgment, right, stop judging other people. Because if you feel that, you want to speak, but you would rather not, because what if you make a mistake? And you don't like acknowledging the fact that you made this mistake again, even though you learned the rule, and other people will probably notice that you made a mistake, or worse, they will tell you that you made a mistake. If you don't want this feedback because you think it's judgment, how can you be making this mistake one more time, again and again? You have been taking English classes for 3 years. What's wrong with you? This is what I mean when I say that people expect this type of judgment, and you probably saw these people yourself, or you witnessed such conversations, or maybe it's happened to you. I see it all the time. When people say something and they stop and they look around. And they don't continue, even though they're not done talking yet, but they say something and they wait. They're waiting for either approval or disapproval, And the situations where people kind of stop and they wait. Okay, are you going to praise me? Are you going to say that I made a mistake again? And they're kind of waiting for somebody's permission to continue talking. It's not a very pleasant conversation when people expect you to give positive feedback to whatever they're saying every 5 seconds. It's really not. This is not a productive conversation for the person who is expected to give feedback. And it's also not very good for the person who is practicing their English skills, because they're not practicing faith in themselves and they're not practicing confidence in that moment. Instead, they're waiting for judgment. And most often they're waiting for disapproval, not even approval. They're expecting somebody to find a mistake in whatever they just said. This speaking behavior is not something you want to cultivate. You want to get rid of it. And one of the easiest ways to get rid of it is if you have this, if you experience that, you probably are doing the same to other people. When other people talk, it doesn't matter in which language, in your first language or in a foreign language, you also are probably listening to their mistakes. Maybe you tell them that they made a mistake. Even if you don't tell it to them, you probably take notes, right? And you go like, okay, they made that mistake. Probably they're not as confident or as competent as I thought about them. Just stop judging other people. That's not the goal of a conversation. When we're having a conversation, we're exchanging information. We're learning from one another. And it's okay if one of the conversation partners make a mistake. When you stop doing it yourself, it will stop happening to you. 100%. Absolutely. Listen to other people not with a purpose to judge them and to judge their speaking skills and to judge their language skills. Listen with an intent to communicate, to receive interesting or important information, or to communicate interesting and compelling ideas. I assume that you have conversations with people that you respect, with people that you want to converse with. Therefore, judging them would not be very appropriate, right? It would not make any sense. Remember that, again, the purpose of a conversation most of the time is either to build connection with people or to strengthen connection with people. Think about creating a connection. When we practice business presentations or public talks with people, and I ask them how do they feel when they need to give a business presentation in the English language, most people feel very tense. Most people feel like it's a difficult task, it's a challenge. And what they tell themselves, if we talk about the inner state, what they tell themselves is that they need to take up this challenge, they need to overcome their fear, they need to smash their fears. And then I ask them, okay, how do you feel the same when you have a conversation with a friend? And they say, of course not. And I ask them, do you say silly things to your friends? And they say, all the time. And I say, like, do your family members make mistakes when they speak in any language? And they say, all the time, my brother mispronounces that, my sister says that, my friend keeps saying that word incorrectly. And I was like, okay, did you stop being friends after you heard that? And they say, of course not. Because in a conversation, we feel more relaxed. We know that we're having a conversation with someone we trust. It's a lot of fun. These are our friends, these are our family members, or these are just people we respect. These are people that we want to connect with on any level. But immediately when people think of a business presentation, well, people feel the responsibility to give a brilliant business presentation. They immediately wait to be judged. They say something and then they wait for approval or disapproval. And if no positive feedback follows, they get upset. In fact, at least to me personally, there is not a lot of difference between a conversation or a business presentation, because when I deliver a business presentation, I speak to people. When I have a conversation, I speak to people. All of them are human beings. We all function the same way. We all value integrity, honesty, connection, the ability to communicate our ideas with clarity. We value when people are not wasting our time. Most of the time, I think what matters is respect. When we feel that our conversation partner respects our opinion, our personality, our time, and it doesn't really matter if we're in a business setting, if I'm wearing a suit or I'm wearing, I don't know, jeans and t-shirt. It does not matter at all. I always remember that this is a human being, this is a person, and I know who I'm talking to, so my focus is not the content of my presentation. I mean, it's not what I wanted to say, it's always who I'm talking to. Either it's an investor, a client, someone from the board of directors, or a friend. It always matters who I'm speaking with. And instead of judgment, try to focus on connection. Listen to other people. This is what might help. If you feel that it's hard for you to listen to yourself even and to hear what you're saying, or if you feel that other people do not really listen to you, instead they're waiting for you to make a mistake so that they can point to that mistake, start listening yourself. Start listening more to other people. That also gives you a chance to to say less, right? And to be more attentive to how people speak, to what people actually mean, and to analyze how what they just said applies to you, or to ask yourself whether what you have just heard resonates with you, yes or no. So give yourself time to digest this information a little bit, especially if the information comes in a foreign language. Listen to other people yourself. That might also help. So change your behavior. People will stop doing those annoying things. Another strategy that I use is I always keep a track record of my mistakes. That means I write them down. Let's say I heard that I made a grammatical mistake. I will write it down. And let's say this is wrong. I will write down the wrong variant, the wrong version of what I said. Let's say in the left column. And in the right column, I will always write the correct version of what I should have said and what I can say the next time. This is a very easy list to make. I can write down a number of things that I heard in my own speech, and I heard that I said things incorrectly. So I will make a list of things that need my revision, that need my attention. I need to go back to these moments and I need to correct them. This takes more time because I need to find out how to actually say this correctly. A lot of people demand too much from themselves. A lot of people think that if they said something incorrectly, they should have said it correctly, and they should always speak correctly, and if they said something incorrectly, they should have corrected themselves immediately. But in reality, that's not what happens. Sometimes you find yourself talking about something for the first time in the English language, let's say, and you've never practiced talking about these things before. How are you supposed to know this vocabulary? How are you supposed to know these constructions if you have so little or zero experience talking about these things? What you need to do, at least this is what I do, I make a list of things that I said wrong, or I said them, but I could have done better, and they don't really make sense, even to me, or they didn't make sense to native speakers, so they were grammatically incorrect. And then I take my time to find the correct equivalents. How can I say the same things better, right? I take my time to correct this. And this is actually very good. My point is this. We will talk about this in a minute. I will explain to you how exactly I'm looking for correct and good equivalents that I want to use in the future, and how I do it, and how often, blah, blah, blah. But what I want to focus on right now is this part. This is what very, very few people actually do. And this is painful in the beginning. It's quite painful, right, to acknowledge that you made 5 mistakes in one sentence. It might be painful. However, I always tell myself that mistakes are good. They're very good, because this is now my plan. If you rely on a language tutor or in a language course or a program that will tell you what you need to learn next, you're always always dependent on somebody's idea of what you need to learn, on somebody else's plan, on somebody else's curriculum. And somebody else's curriculum may have very little to do with your personality. Somebody might have come up with a plan that just doesn't work for you. Or somebody might think that present perfect continuous is a very important topic. However, it's not really what you need every day, right? You need to learn how to use your prepositions correctly, or you need to learn how to finish your sentences, or how to end your speech, or how to introduce yourself, or how to stop confusing present simple and present perfect, right? I mean, it doesn't really matter. I try not to go according to the plan when I work with people. My plan always comes from people. I mean, I create a plan only after I listen to a person. I understand what they struggle with, what they need to do, or if I'm working with a small group, then I will work with a group. And then the plan comes from the people. I make a plan to help those people speak better so that they can correct their individual moments. They can correct the things that they individually need to correct, because they cannot move on to the next level without correcting those things. This is their roadblock. So when I listen to myself and I make a list of mistakes that I made, this is good. I tell myself, wow, look at that. Now I have a plan. I have a plan of what I need to do next. Because if I don't hear these things, guess what? Next time I talk, I will make the same mistake. If I did nothing about it, rather than just got upset that I made a mistake again, my language skills are not going to improve. And my goal is always to improve, to move to the next level. If I want to learn something from my own speech, from my own experience, I do this. This is my plan. And it's very good because I now have a very specific plan. My plan is to correct this thing, to learn how to use this preposition, to learn how to use this tense, to learn this, and then I correct each thing individually. That becomes I follow my own plan, I apply it the next time I speak, and I logically improve my speaking skills. As I said, I make a list of things that I want to correct. A logical question here is, how do I find the things that I want to correct? Obviously, I do not want to take them from somebody else's speech. I am working with my speech and I'm working with my speaking patterns. That means I need to, in order to find those mistakes, in order to find the things that I'm saying incorrectly, I need to listen to my own speech. We talked earlier about the importance of hearing what you're saying. However, in a conversation, that's not always possible. It's just, we speak fast, we need to respond fast to what people are saying, and very often there is no time to analyze what we just said, or sometimes we get, we're not that attentive, or we're excited about something, or we're distracted and we stop listening to what we were saying at some point. This is why I'm making videos, because this is my practicing material. This is what I practice with. I make videos, and if you're taking my courses, you know that I communicate with everyone individually, via voice messages. We send voice messages to each other. We communicate via video messages as well. This is my practical material. I'm doing it because I'm helping you to get detailed, individual, personalized feedback on your work, but I'm also helping myself. I'm doing it for myself in the first place, so I have something to work with. So what you want to do is you want to work with your own speech, not somebody else's speech, not a movie, not a TV show, not a YouTube video. If you're working on your listening skills, yes, YouTube, movies, songs are good materials. If you're working on your speaking skills, your own speech, your own conversations, this is what you need to be working with. A very easy way to collect material is to send voice messages to people, or simply to record your own voice. If you don't want to show it to other people, you can simply record yourself using your own smartphone. Videos. Those people who have taken my public speaking course, all of them have a private account where they put videos of themselves and they know how to work with this material. And I'm telling you, it's very painful in the very beginning, because people look at themselves and they realize that they've never looked at themselves like that. They're not used to seeing their face on camera. They're not used to listening to their own voice. And the first reaction in 99% of the cases is, oh my God, that's not me, please delete it. I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to talk about it. I just don't want to see it. When I work with people, very often individually, who want to prepare a public presentation in the English language, especially those people who present quite often, but they often present in the Russian language, let's say. Now they want to learn to present in the English language, or they have had a few presentations in English, but they're not quite happy. I always ask them, have you seen videos of yourself? Have you, watched the videos of your previous presentations? Again, in most of the cases, people will say, no, I don't like watching the videos of myself. I don't watch my previous talks. When I ask them why, they say, I don't want to get upset. I just don't want to see them, because I know, and I knew it at the moment of speaking, that it was not perfect, it was not great, and I just don't want to come back to that negative experience. But you can see it as a negative experience. However, I choose to see it as my plan, my learning plan. Because if I learn to correct what I did wrong during that presentation, I will do it differently during my next presentation. That's just very simple, very logical, and it always works. I was once listening to a podcast, which was an interview with some professional athlete. I don't remember. I think he was a footballer or a baseball player. It doesn't really matter. But I remember this fact. He said that he would work with a coach, as all professional athletes do, and of course he would have to play. I don't remember football or baseball. He would have to play almost every day, but there were days where his coach would call him in and they would sit on a couch together. He said, that was my training session. I thought I was going to play. I thought I was going to be I was going to be running around and competing. But we would sit on a couch, and my coach would turn on the TV, and we would watch the game. So his coach made him watch his own games. The recording of the game where he played, right? The recording of the game, and he said, I hated those nights because I was looking at myself on TV. Already when I was playing, I knew that I made a mistake here and I made a mistake here, and my coach made me watch every mistake one more time. I hated that experience. And then I realized, and then I understood why he made me go through this experience. Because his coach wanted him to be aware of the mistakes he made during the last game, so that he doesn't repeat the same mistakes in the next game. And most people, when we talk about developing speaking skills in a foreign language, most people don't think like that. They don't think that way. They want to avoid mistakes when they speak. They want to speak perfectly. They want to speak correctly. But if they make a mistake and they don't correct themselves, they do nothing about that mistake, 99%, chances are that the next time they talk, they're going to make the same mistake because they did nothing to correct it. They did nothing to eliminate it. They did nothing to, nothing, absolutely nothing. When you do nothing, the result is also nothing. What they did is they reinforced that negative experience. I made a mistake. How could I? That was negative experience. And negative experiences are usually very strong with us. So the next time they open their mouth, they expect this negative experience to repeat, and they either feel stuck, they either feel very unconfident, or they say something again, they make the same mistake, and they get upset again. This is a vicious cycle. We want to break that. So where was I? You need to be working with your own material. voice messages or videos. I mean, it doesn't really matter how you do it. If you take any of my courses, you will have to do it because everybody has a podcast channel now and everybody records videos of themselves. It's something that you must do, and it's a private communication between a student and a coach. It's never published anywhere because the purpose is not to share it with anybody. And again, we're not looking for approval or disapproval here. We're working with our own mistakes so that we can improve them. Once you have identified, once you have made a plan of what you need to improve, or what you said wrong, and you realize, okay, I did say it incorrectly. How can I fix that? For example, actually before that, step number 1 is I identify that I made a mistake, right? I hear that I made a mistake. And in order to do this, I need to listen to myself again, or I need to watch a video of myself again. I hear that I said something incorrectly. Sometimes it's going to be very obvious. Sometimes it's not very obvious to me, but I always ask myself one question. Have I heard a native speaker say so? Have I maybe read it anywhere? In a blog post written by native speakers? Have I seen it in a book written by native speakers? Where did I see that? I always ask myself that question. If the answer is no, and I cannot remember where I saw this and how it actually entered my head, I go in and check myself. Then it becomes a mistake, and I put it in the left column, right? The column of mistakes. And now I work on correcting my mistakes. Okay, how do I do that? For example, I sent a voice message to one of my students yesterday. It turned out to be a pretty long voice message, and I always listen to my own voice messages again. So when I listened to it one more time, I noticed 2 things. And I actually already noticed it at the moment of speaking, but because I didn't know how to say it better, I kept saying the same words. I just stuck to what I was saying because I knew that was wrong, but I just couldn't figure out at the moment of speaking how to put it differently. And with another thing, I already noticed that it was a bit off, and I was not sure. So the first thing I said was positive dynamic. I keep saying that you should not translate every word that you're saying, but I think that's what happened to me actually, because that is direct translation from the Russian language. I think I told her that I saw positive dynamic. And when I do things again and again, when I repeatedly do the same things over and over again, I see positive dynamic. And I was like, in Russian that's позитивная динамика, right? And I was like, have I heard a native speaker say so? And I couldn't remember if I actually heard it anywhere. So what I did, I went to the dictionary and I checked the definition of the word dynamic. What is dynamic? Dynamic is an adjective. For example, you can have, it's a very dynamic, your speech was very dynamic, right? It's an adjective that we use to describe things. That was a very dynamic event. But I didn't use it as an adjective, I used it as a noun. And positive dynamic. I use it as a noun, so I checked if people use it as a noun, and it turned out they do. And the definition of dynamic is the underlying cause of growth, the underlying cause of positive results or growth. And that does actually imply what I wanted to say, however, it's not a 100% equivalent. And then what I do next, if you watched my live videos where I give strategies on how you can correct yourself, I went to this website, which is Scale Engine. I think this is short, just Google it and you will find it because the URL is actually very long. And I put in the word combination positive dynamic to find examples of this word combination in sentences said by native speakers. And I did find examples. People do say it, but however, it's mostly used in academic context, when people write academic papers, when people talk about scientific discoveries, when people talk about clinical trials, they can see a positive dynamic in something. So that's quite formal, and it's not really the context that I was using this word in. So that's correct. It's just probably not that common. And I thought, okay, I thought to myself, how can I correct that and how can I say it better? What I did is I went to this website, it's called thesaurus.com, and I looked for synonyms to the word dynamic. It was actually very difficult because there are a lot of synonyms to the word dynamic, which is an adjective, but there are no synonyms to the word dynamic, which is a noun. I couldn't find any synonyms. Then, if you go to Scout and you put in that phrase, positive dynamic, you can also find for synonyms or ways to say it differently. Or I think I even Googled something like how to say positive dynamic differently, or, what does it mean? Positive dynamic, what does it mean? Actually, if you use online dictionaries, and I always give this advice, check your ideas in the dictionaries. Because when you go to a dictionary such as Cambridge Dictionary, online dictionaries or Merriam-Webster, you will always find a definition, or Collins Dictionary, or Macmillan. I always check the same word in 3 or 4 dictionaries, because every dictionary will give a slightly different definition. And every definition, sometimes it's clearer, sometimes it's less clear, but to me it's fascinating actually how, my idea of the word becomes, first it's a little bit clear, then it gets more clear, and then more clear, and finally I see the big picture once I have read 4 different definitions. Because they talk about the same thing, just using different words. It might be a rule that every dictionary needs to use a different definition to explain the same word, but it's actually very, very helpful. So I looked this word up in a few different dictionaries, and I was looking for synonyms, for ways to say it differently. I can't remember now where exactly I found it, Google or any of the dictionaries. I can't remember. My rule of thumb is when I look for an alternative, I want to find something that native speakers say. So I ignore and I disregard websites such as Converso, Reverso, Context, whatever. The websites that, that divide the web page into 2 columns, and on the right you see English, and on the left you see Russian, Spanish, or whatever. So when they are looking for translation of sentences where these word combinations are used, I ignore that completely because that's not how native speakers talk. I want to find it somewhere on a web page that was created by native speakers for native speakers. It might be a YouTube video as well. If I heard it on YouTube, that should be 100% okay. But then again, the question is, how can you be 100% confident that what you found online is what people actually say? Because you don't have a native speaker in your house to ask, do you actually say that, or is that correct, right? You don't help people to bother, especially if these ideas come to you late at night, right? So what my rule of thumb is that I make sure that the alternative that I have found, first of all, is used by native speakers. So I found it on a website that was created for native speakers, by native speakers, and I have found at least 10 examples. At least 10 examples in different sources, and if I have found that 10 native speakers use it in this context that I need, and I want to use it in the same context, then most probably that is correct. If I found 1, I'm not sure. If I found 2, and in very weird context, and it's not actually my context, I'm not sure either. It's okay, it's something that I found on the internet, but it doesn't mean, it might have been written by someone who didn't even finish high school, and probably they're not educated enough. Or probably it's written by someone whose first language is Spanish, but they call themselves Joshua Smith, like an English name. It might be written by someone who just, again, maybe not a native speaker, or maybe someone that just made a mistake or made a typo or whatever. I need 10. And this number gives me confidence, and then I need to use it myself. And the way to say it differently is very simple, actually. You can just say positive results. That's it. Steady, positive results. Or you can even say steady, dynamic results. Very simple. Turned out to be more simple than I thought. Then, another thing I heard when I was listening to my own voice message, that's actually worse. I said adequate, to. And again, even though I talk about this a lot, And that's the reason why I actually talk about it, because I make these mistakes too. It's a direct translation from the Russian language. I said something like, the results that we're getting are adequate to the amount of effort that we put in. And if you think about it, in Russian we also say, результаты адекватны усилию, right? And we use the word adequate in this context. And then I asked myself, I realized that I translated it. I asked myself, have I heard this before? And have I actually heard the word adequate used together with the preposition to? And I simply Googled the same phrase, adequate to. Does anybody say that? I couldn't find a single example. Then I went to an online dictionary, Merriam-Webster, Cambridge. Again, I checked it in different dictionaries, and I actually checked, what does the word adequate mean? Because I assumed that I know this word, but what does it actually mean? Turned out that the word adequate means satisfactory, acceptable. You see, it's very different from what we imply when we say this word in the Russian language. Адекватный, он адекватный человек. It doesn't mean satisfactory. It doesn't mean, what is that word, acceptable. Because in English we say, that's adequate for my needs. It means it's okay, it's enough for my needs. It's acceptable. It's adequate for my needs. Or, this amount of books is adequate for his age. That's it. Adequate means a completely different thing. This is why it cannot be used with this preposition. So again, I started looking for ways to say it differently. When I understood that the correct word is, the meaning of this word is actually satisfactory or acceptable, I realized that I don't need this word, and I definitely cannot use this word to express what I want to say. And I thought, okay, what other words do I have in my mind that can explain what I want to show? And what I want to show is the relation, the cause and effect relationship. If you do this, then you will achieve this. So you start thinking logically. When I have such moments, I just take a pen and I brainstorm and I write down all the words that come to my head. What other words could have I said instead? What other words I could have used instead? Again, I noticed that I said it wrong and I immediately corrected myself, because it would be correct to say what other words I could have used instead. The secret is to say it twice or 3 times so that you remember the correct version. And I wrote down words correlate, cause, effect, relationship, a bunch of other words. And then I looked at my list, and the word correlate was the one that I thought, okay, that word might express what I want to use. And I started looking for examples. I just, again, Googled, this phrase that I think is correct. The result correlates with the effort. Like when you Google such things, you don't want to be correct, you don't want to be perfect, it doesn't matter. Your job is to find out if this is actually being said, if this is actually being used by native speakers. And Google will always make suggestions, like, did you mean that? Or did you want to say that? I mean, it will always help you out. I Googled that, and it turned out that a better way to say that would be, so I have words such as correlation, outcome, depends on, the amount of effort. I'm actually looking at my list when I was brainstorming. And I came up with a phrase like what I could have said. Instead of result, I actually found that outcome is a better word. So when I did this Google search, I saw that people use the word effort, not with the word result, as I was thinking, that they use, to show this cause and effect relationship, they use the word effort and they use the word outcome. And people say, the effort we apply for a desired outcome. Again, that's interesting. People use the word effort with the verb apply. You apply effort, or you exert effort. It's just when you exert effort, you put a lot more effort into this. So a correct way would be to say the effort we apply for a desired income. So you have to understand how much effort you apply to receive the desired outcome, right? That would be English. And what I was saying before was not actually English. It was a version of English. So there was a direct correlation between the amount of effort you apply and the outcome. That would be it. And so I found 2 ways to say it differently. So remember what I was saying. You make the left column with your mistakes, with the things that you said wrong, and in front of each thing that you said wrong, you write down the correct version. Sometimes there is more than one correct version, and this is excellent, because before that, you had no idea how to say that, and now you know 2 or 3 ways to say it differently. That's excellent. That's very good. Now, the next step is the most important step. You do this, right? You find an equivalent to every mistake, and you check yourself. You check that native speakers really say so. This will take some time, and you have to understand that it's okay that it takes time. It's okay that you need to apply some effort to find the correct definition, or to find the correct way to say what you actually mean. This is why when you work with your own videos, your own voice messages, it's important that you work with very short pieces, right? If you, let's say I just made a video which is 1 hour long, I'm probably not going to listen to every sentence, try to find a mistake in every sentence and deconstruct every sentence, because I said a lot of sentences in 60 minutes. You want to start small. If you heard a mistake, if you clearly notice that you heard it, you made a mistake and you heard it, you want to go back to exactly that sentence where you made a mistake and work with 1 sentence only. Maybe you will find that you said, you used the wrong word. Okay, fix that word in that sentence and take a look at the entire sentence. Maybe there is something else you can correct here. Maybe there is more to correct. Practice saying the whole sentence differently. For example, those people who took the creative writing workshop just recently last week, we worked with 1 small paragraph, and we worked on transforming every sentence of that paragraph, and when we were done, it sounded very, very different from like what we started with. And we didn't use any new words. We didn't use any sophisticated vocabulary to do that transformation. We simply changed sometimes word order, we fixed grammar, and we corrected those mistakes. You know, when you feel that what you're saying is not actually what you mean, but you don't know how to say it differently, so you just continue saying what you already know and what you always say. You know why people repeat themselves and why people find that they need a lot of time to explain something in the English language? It's because they say something and they feel that it's not what they wanted to say, or they feel that they didn't make themselves clear enough. And then they add more information to clarify what they already said. But because their vocabulary is limited and they don't have enough practical experience explaining their ideas clearly, they end up repeating themselves. Instead of adding new information to what they already said, they repeat old information. Maybe with slightly different words, but they just repeat themselves. That's another good mistake that you can work with if you notice that you go back and forth saying the same thing over and over again, even if you said it before, even if people already understood you, but you feel the need to explain 1 more time, and you feel the need to add more information to what you already said. If you notice that, if this is your mistake, you keep repeating yourself. Focus on this. Your task will be, so in the left column will be a very long and rambling version of what you said. Take any explanation. If you're preparing for a job interview, listen to your story where you answer the question, tell me about yourself. Listen to what you actually say when you introduce yourself. And here on the right, you want to write down a shorter, clearer version of your professional experience. You want to be more precise, more concise, and more succinct. This might be a mistake that you need to work with to create clean sentences where every word has weight. You might also notice that when you speak and when you listen to yourself, your most frequent mistake is filler words. If you hear yourself saying things like, and so on, that might be something worth working at. And if you hear that you make those sounds, if you hear that you use the word just, or the word very, or the word really all the time, between your sentences. That might be a signal that you want to work with this, and that might be something you want to correct and eliminate from your speech. Everybody is very different. Everybody needs to work with individual mistakes. Most of the times, we need to work on a little bit of everything, right? Because we all use filler words at some point. We all make grammatical mistakes because we're not native speakers, and we often say things that we didn't mean to say for whatever reasons. This is okay, that's fine. It's important that you work with this. So once I have written down the correct version of what I should have said, I corrected every mistake. What I do next is I make sure I say these correct versions out loud several times. I say them out loud. I don't just read them, I don't just repeat them, I really say them out loud the way I would have said it in a conversation. Like I really mean it. That's very important. And I mentally go back to that conversation and I imagine saying the same phrase to the person I was speaking with. But now, the correct version of it. Sometimes it's enough. Sometimes if just one word was off, or one sentence structure was off, sometimes it's enough to repeat this sentence one more time, but with more confidence, using correct grammar, correct vocabulary. Sometimes if I need to work on the entire structure of my speech, if I understand that I talk a lot, but I'm not making myself clear, or if I understand that whatever I'm saying is not helping a person to understand me, I need to restructure the whole speech. And in this case, I will find a better way to say it, and then I will say the whole thing over again, like I mean it. Again, I will be talking to myself at this point. I don't need a conversation partner, but I need to say as if I'm talking to that person again, as if I really mean it. And the last important step is that I will record myself. I will record myself when I say the things that I want to say the new way. And then I don't need a teacher to give me feedback, to give me approval, disapproval, to judge me or whatever. I will have, remember, because I was initially working with my own voice message or with my own video. So I have the original version, I have the first draft, and at the end I have another voice message where I have another video where I corrected my own mistakes. And I can objectively compare. How does that sound? How does that sound? If I said 15 filler words in the first video, I can clearly hear that in this video I said only 3. That's good progress. And this is where I would use this expression. That's a positive dynamic. But now I would probably not use that anymore. I would say that's good progress. I can hear that I'm clearly making progress. Or if I use the wrong tense in the first video, in the second video I can hear that I corrected the tense and it just sounds correct and my ideas are better connected. And the logic of the message is just better, it flows, it's more smooth. I can compare and I can count these things when I rely on facts, when I rely on numbers, and numbers are very simple. I wrote down 10 mistakes, and in the updated version of the same video, I made only 5, or only 3, or only 2, or 0. This is good. This is my result. And this is what I rely on. And that's it. That's very simple. I'm sorry, that was probably a long video. It took us over an hour, but if we wrap it up, the algorithm is very simple. You need to use your own voice in your own videos as your practical materials when you work with your speaking skills. You need to write down the mistakes that you make. You need to learn to hear them. That's very important. You hear them, you write them down, you don't get upset. That's very important. You don't get frustrated. When you have written them down, you see your plan. Okay, now that's my plan. That's what I'm going to work with. You find the correct equivalent, you correct every mistake, and then you say the same thing that you already said, but now correctly, in better English. Or if you said it in some version of English, now you say it in English. You say it out loud until you feel confident, until you sound confident, and you can clearly hear and feel that you sound confident. Remember that inner state I was talking about. When you have found 10 different examples where native speakers use what you're about to use. I personally feel very confident that I can say that too. If I heard it on a YouTube video, if I saw it in a textbook, if I saw it in a movie, if I heard it in a podcast, if I read it in a few blog posts, I feel very confident, and I'm very sure that people really say so in English, and I can use that as well. And when I say something that I know is correct, that gives me even more confidence. That's actually where my confidence comes from, because I hear that I'm saying a correct sentence. And when I hear that I say things correctly, and I know that it's not just my opinion that it's correct, it's actually correct, and I can prove it, I can go back to that link, I can always prove it, and I can prove it to myself that that's correct. My inner state is very stable. I radiate confidence. Doesn't matter what language I'm using at the moment, English or Russian. I think I have developed a better habit of listening to myself when I speak English. I do not apply so much effort, and I'm not that attentive to my own speech when I speak in Russian. When I get to hear the recording of my own voice in the Russian language, I am usually surprised at the amount of filler words that I use in Russian. I use a lot less in English. I use fewer filler words for sure when I speak English. But that's it. That's the strategy. The job is to build positive experiences, and only you are responsible for building those positive experiences. If you know what to do, if you know how to work with any information, and here you're working with information that is absolutely free, you are the creator of this information. You're working with your own videos, with your own voice messages. It's very simple. But knowing how to work with this is key. If you know how to work with this, you do not depend on teachers, on curriculum, on programs, on somebody's schedule. You do it on your own schedule. You do it as much as you want to do today. You do as you feel, you feel that that's enough for you to do today. You choose how many words you want to correct today. You choose how long your voice message should be today. You choose how much you want to improve, because it's your life. That's just my strategy. That's how I practice. And I am very well aware of the fact that I do make mistakes when I speak in English. And I'm always happy if I hear one, because that's my opportunity to get better and to stop making the same mistakes, so I can start making new ones, or so that at least I notice other mistakes, because I definitely say things that I just don't notice yet, for sure. There are obviously ways to say them better, to say them differently, but I'm just not there yet. I'm not at the stage where I realize that I can actually pay attention to this too, and I can try to say it differently. I can try to say it better. And for this, I listen to native speakers every day. I mean, I am subscribed to podcasts. I make sure that I have, if I watch YouTube channels, they're in English. Every day I'm exposed to video and audio materials in the English language. And I do this exercise, which is inquisitive, intensive listening. Again, I don't listen to the whole thing. If I practice my English skills, I don't have YouTube in the background all day long. It's not helping me in any way. I will sit down and I will listen to 1 minute only, but very closely. I will try to hear every single word that people are saying. And that actually helps me, because then I'm asking myself, have I heard this word before? Do I know what this word means? Can I use it in my own speech? A lot of questions. This is why inquisitive listening. Did I know that people actually go up here or go down? So I listen to the rhythm, to the intonation, but 1 minute, trust me, that's a lot of material to practice with. That's a lot if you really listen to every single word. And if you know how to work with short 1 minute videos. And let's say my listening course, and now we have an additional library where you practice your reading skills, your listening skills. We work with movies, we work with podcasts, we work with fiction books and audiobooks. if you know how to work with each type of content, and if you know how to deliberately practice and how to benefit from this 1 minute that you have right now for practicing your English skills, that is such a game changer. The content itself does not matter that much. It should be interesting to you. That's the only criteria. But the strategy that you apply to work with that content, this is the game changer. This is what you really need to pay attention to. Because then you become absolutely independent and you can practice anywhere with any type of content and you continuously improve. That's my point. If what I said makes sense, if you can relate to my experience, or if you feel like you can try it out and give those strategies a try them out and then see if that works for you. And I'll speak to you soon. Thanks for watching.